Welcome to Taking the Tradition On. It's a series of conversations about oral storytelling with exceptional and extraordinary people. This is series 4, Words in the Works, which is all about applied storytelling. So using storytelling in lots of different spheres. All previous series and episodes are available on my YouTube channel, Taking the Tradition On. So go have an explore, have a root through, and if you like them, please do subscribe. As ever, I've got a couple of little thank yous to say. The first is to Get Words and Edgeways. This is their very posh Zoom account with proper webinar function, which they are letting me use. So I'm very grateful to them. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, my marvellous patrons who give me the time to hold these conversations and to put them out and to make them freely available for anybody who wants to watch and listen. And if you want to join them, then we are always happy to have more patrons to talk about storytelling. You'll always be the first to hear who's going to be my next guest on Taking the Tradition On. And please do give suggestions as well, who you'd like to see. So tonight we are taking on a big topic: storytelling in education. And I've got just the right person to do that with me. Perfect storyteller, the amazing Phil Okwedy. And Phil is from Pembrokeshire. He is the son of a Welsh mother and a Nigerian father. And he uses that dual heritage to really draw in his work as an oral performance storyteller and myth maker, looking for the contemporary and the traditional. But even more importantly than that, for tonight, Phil is a former teacher who now turned storyteller, still finding himself going regularly back into schools with that different hat of the storyteller on. He's particularly been working and facilitating the Creative Schools project and Cynefin projects for Arts Council Wales. Phil works in both secondary and primary and works with story on many aspects of the curriculum: oracy, literacy, Welsh heritage and cultural diversity. And he has also been working with fellow storyteller and clinical psychiatrist Steve Killick on a programme, Feelings Are Funny Things, working with young people to explore feelings, thoughts and actions, a programme which I think was vital before lockdown and has since become even more crucial. I think we all need we all need a little bit of help to kind of figure out those feelings. But I think for young people particularly, having the language and the time to explore and having the vocabulary to talk about feelings is really important. So I'm sure we're going to talk about that some more. So welcome to the amazing Phil Okwedy. Please stick your hands together, clap, go wild on the chat. Hurrah! Whoop, 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 whoop,
Good evening, everybody. I can just see that Janet Dowling has said what I was going to say, that Steve is a clinical psychologist, not a psychiatrist, because I'm sure he'll be straight on.
My deep apologies to Steve, and thank you for your help, Janet. I am very sorry. Yes, and hopefully I think we might be getting Steve on to talk about exactly what that means in a different episode, but we will maybe talk about Feelings Are Funny Things a little bit later on. But I was just going to throw you in at the deep end and be really cool and ask you the big question, in that is storytelling important in education? It's a really traditional and old art form. Is it still relevant? What does it have to offer?
It's absolutely relevant. Immediately what it offers is connection. The difference between being able to tell a story and be present with the learners, as opposed to reading a story or giving them information in any other way, is just instant. And yeah, that engagement level is completely different. And the stories themselves, they offer relevance and connection, this sense of connection that we have with each other when we're telling stories because of what our brains are doing. And across the curriculum as well. The stories improve comprehension. Oral stories improve comprehension, and across the curriculum. So other forms of information, other forms of written information, comprehension improves through oral storytelling, through listening and telling stories. Because I think one of the important things is to get learners telling.
So for them to actually be telling themselves.
Yes, yes.
So why? Why is that important then?
I think, well, if I came to storytelling as a teacher in order to raise attainment in writing, in the children's writing, and we identified that the children had no story structure in their minds at all. So when they were writing, all their energy would go on what happens next. So in a kind of 45-minute hour writing session, you might get, me and Johnny ran down the road, the spaceship came down, bang, 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 exclamation mark, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, and that would be it. Yeah, and so all their energy was just on what happens next. So Michael Harvey, fantastic storyteller, came in and taught us, gave us the skills to be able to share a story with our classes. We then gave them the time to play with that story, learn that story in their own words. So they had ownership. And then we came back to the writing process. So now they don't have to think about what happens next. They're just focusing on the quality of their writing. And it worked. It was great.
I'm biting my lip now not to get too nerdy, because I think people just talk about writing as one skill. And people mean, I had a project in a school where they said we want to develop their writing, and they were really unclear by what they meant by writing. And it turned out it was a project with Fiona Collins, so I'm sure you know. So Fiona, and every teacher in the school had a different definition of what we meant by writing. And so the project just wasn't, it's a bit of a dog's dinner, because everybody was pulling in a different direction. Until we actually, and we have been asking for CPD all the way through, until we actually kind of managed to get the teachers in a room and just the massive piece of paper and go, what do you actually mean by the word writing? And they came up with all of these different things, and they broke writing down into different skills. And for the first time, they looked at, we were able to say, okay, do you remember when we did this exercise? We were taking that bit, and how you scaffold writing is there's so many different bits to that. So like you're talking about narrative structure of being able to hold, that consequence of narrative, beginning, middle, end, of how consequences go, how you tie things up at the end. Then there's all the description. Then there's the actual making things up. Then there's there's the physical ability to write. Most of what you do when you talk about creative writing, most of what you do you can do on your tongue. You don't need the physical writing. It's the very last stage. And but kind of breaking it down into mark making, it's such a complex thing to do, creative writing, with so many stages. And I think you're right that you can really use storytelling to scaffold and support that, to model structures and for all sorts of bits. And that's just one bit of the curriculum, I suppose. So how old were you at that point then? Was that the first time that you had discovered storytelling?
Before I became a teacher, I was an LSA, which is the equivalent of a TA in England, a teaching assistant. And actually, I came across Daniel Morden 30 years ago, so maybe 6 or 7 years, 5 years before I started teaching. But it kind of went over it was great when he was in the class. I can remember it vividly, but as a thing that I was going to be involved in, it kind of just passed me by until I came to it as a teacher, which would have been in 2011. So how old am I? Nearly 50 then, I guess.
So that was your first experience of using storytelling in the classroom, of just trying to give them a model for.
Well, almost. It was a very big school, and we had an inset with Pi Corbett, and whether he meant it or not, he got all the teachers standing in a circle telling a story, but this ends up being by rote. So after the inset, all the teachers in the school did this, but what we did and what we were asked to do was video our children as a whole class telling a story all together. And the difference that Michael introduced when he came in was this sense of ownership. And so each child learned the story from the teachers, but they learned it then in their own way. and they played with it. And so they had their own words to tell the story. And that idea, you were talking earlier, I think I'm very interested in oral rehearsal, that element. And to me, that's writing. So that element of the writing process, the oral rehearsal is kind of what I focus on now when I go into schools.
What effect did that have on your children? So they get to be able to remember and to hold a whole narrative, and to make it their own, to change the words, to play with the description, to play with, and I suppose if you're putting it into your own words, then there's that whole visualization as well,
Yeah.
and kind of and having a structure of a narrative. What did you have any other effects, and start using storytelling for other things, or was it just really for writing at the beginning?
So I've become much more interested in the oral rehearsal side of it, the storytelling side of it, and part of that is the kind of tacit knowledge that comes through telling, through seeing somebody else tell. So the story itself, we're experiencing somebody else's story, but we know through research of the brain that actually our brains light up the same way for teller and listener. So we are really experiencing this, and body language too. I mean, you can't teach this stuff. You can talk about it, but you can't teach it. But through telling, that tacit knowledge is made much more available, and all the little things that teachers don't mark, for the most part, maybe they get mentioned in a school report as a sort of aside, but they're not the focus. So a child who is not particularly confident, particularly when it comes to something like writing, the way that's normally taught, suddenly is absolutely blossoming. And of course, with oral storytelling, I would be quite happy to let them not write. They can video it. They can find another way of presenting their learning.
And that is changing in schools. Obviously, physically being able to write is still crucial and is still part of it. But actually, it is now valid to present in different ways, to record, and I suppose from COVID as well, there are lots of apps. So I mean, I don't know. I'm looking at the people who are here. I don't know how much people know about education and the way. And we are talking very specific. Like I go into schools in England, so I have knowledge of storytelling and education in England and Wales. And you're very specifically based in Wales, aren't you, Phil?
Yeah.
So that's a very specific place and way of teaching. I completely forgot what my original point was going to be now. But yeah, so there's things that people might not know about, like things like Seesaw, which it's a video based app, so children can record themselves, they can do reports, and it's a video. They will always have iPads in the classroom now that they can record on, and also typing is becoming really important. Lots of children are now typing stories, and you can use voice recognition to actually to change voice to text. So, and certainly when you go into the world of work, I mean, that's a really interesting thing of how important is it going to be able to actually physically write in 20 years time? How much are people going to be able to be doing that? It's still such a massive focus in schools. I don't know how much of a focus it's going to be outside of school in 20 years.
Well, I think that talks to, particularly in Wales, we have a new curriculum, which has taken a long time to actually be implemented, but just last autumn, I think it's fully implemented. And it comes out of something called the Donaldson Report, which actually identified, through the work of Ken Robinson, about the idea that the education system that we had was an education system for an industrial age. For little units, our children becoming little units of work, educated just enough in order to do that. Whereas, in fact, we don't know what we're educating children for. At the moment, we have no idea what jobs they're going to do. One of the ones that's often mentioned are apps. So I'm not sure now how much that market is worth, but it'll be billions of pounds, and just probably in Britain, actually. And before the people who are making those apps now, none of them were trained or educated to do that. It did not exist. And so it's this set of skills that's important. And you hear employers talking about that, rather than this kind of old formal education.
I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? So Wales is at a very specific time, and it's a very exciting place to be in education. They were at the bottom of the PISA tests, sort of literacy, numeracy, digital competency. When that was tested, kind of, they were certainly bottom in Britain, and they were very low down the kind of European charts of standard of education. So they the Welsh Assembly commissioned this report from Professor Donaldson, and Professor Donaldson came back with this idea for creative curriculum. And absolutely, they talked to industry, and industry said they are going to need specific knowledge, and you're not going to teach them exactly the specific knowledge that we need anyway, because each of our industries has a very specific skill set. What we need is competent humans who can do things that machines don't. Mm-hmm. They need to be able to do all the things that humans are really good at. They need to be able to take an idea from there and match it with an idea over here, and kind of have that sparking and that link. They need to be able to collaborate with each other. They need to think sideways. They need to kind of do that working away at a problem and figuring things out. And so that's now what the education system is aiming towards, is that they've got together a set of skills called the creative habits of mind, that you can, and looking at creativity as something that is innate to humans that machines can't do, and that you can apply to any situation and any part of the curriculum. It's not about the expressive arts, it's about a mindset, a creative mindset. And it's not just storytelling that is about. No. But I think storytelling can be a really vital and useful tool in that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that idea of creativity is absolutely at the heart of the new Welsh curriculum. And it is in black and white stated that is at the heart of the curriculum, just as literacy and numeracy is. That is the intention. And I mean, creativity in this sense is everything. Try and think of a job that doesn't require creativity. There aren't any. Because I think even as human beings, if we're even doing the most mundane thing, in order to do the mundane thing, we'll probably find a creative way of doing it just to pass the time. And this creativity anyway is very specific in Wales, as you mentioned, the creative habits of mind. So there are 5 of them. I think there are inquisitiveness, imagination, perseverance, discipline, collaboration. We can argue about that, but what it does give across a school, across the education system, is a way of talking about creativity. So gardeners are creative, cake makers are creative, engineers, architects. And you also mentioned Lead Creative Schools, which is this program of bringing creative practitioners into schools to work on specific projects with chosen groups and with teachers in order to kind of cross-fertilize the skills from one discipline to the other. So it's just essential and really vibrant
I mean, I am a bit of an evangelist for it. I mean, I love the system. I love Lead Creative Schools. I think it's very exciting, and I think it's just a really great way of looking at creativity and teaching. So that's what happened. But what I'm also very interested in you, Phil, because you were a teacher when that first came in, and now you're a storyteller. And I'm quite interested in that evolution from teacher to storyteller. And you were starting to use storytelling in teaching. Why didn't you stay kind of developing your storytelling, working with class, using that storytelling within your own school? Why did you need to leave to follow storytelling?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I was very lucky. At the beginning of the Lead Creative Schools project, my head gave me the information and said, shall we apply for this? And a week later, emailed me and said, have you applied for it? So, but I was really excited, and I was really excited by it. So I applied for it. So I was the coordinator on our first project. And then because of various issues, I became the teacher involved in the project. And then when the other practitioners, we had 2 other practitioners working, and when they found out I was a storyteller, they incorporated that into the project too. And I guess
which is really an example of good practice, because that's the idea. Yeah. So you have a coordinator who's the link in the school. You have a teacher who works with their class, and you have bring creative practitioners in to help. And it's supposed to be about the teacher learning, the creative practitioner learning, the pupils learning. It's a learning experience for everybody, learning from everybody else. So really good practice, actually, that they should be using you and developing your creative skills, as well as the children. And it's not about doing 2 children. It's supposed to be child-led when it's it's all growing together, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But I think that experience, directly being involved in a creative way, just showed me what is possible and what else is possible. And then I sort of bred a little bit of a frustration too, because at the end of the day, this project was broken down into data. And that's what was wanted. That's really what was wanted, was data. And the creative, for instance, the creative habits, it's not a continuum. Every time you come to another project, you would kind of look at them and kind of gauge where you are to start with, how you feel. And maybe then you look towards the end and have I used something? Do I feel there's some improvement, or I've gained something, rather than it being on a continuum of sort of hard data. But that's the way the kind of school wanted to go, that it is a continuum. And then really luckily, redundancy came up, so I just took the opportunity. And now it's all the other learning that goes on that I value, and it's all the other learning. It's the things that resonate and the things that connect with the children, how they connect with each other, that I really value. And none of that as a teacher is what you're paid for. It might be what you go into it to start with. But anybody I think is taught will know that increasingly less and less of their time goes to teaching. I mean, it's nothing to do with storytelling, but one of my favorite things when I was actually training, I trained in one school. So I was in the school the whole time, and I already knew the children really well. And there was a little girl in maths, but across the curriculum, she never put her hand up. She never offered anything. And one day I just saw her hand come up. I can't actually remember what she said, because it was this was the moment, but there's I shared that with her parents and shared that in a school report, and I shared it with them verbally, but it's not what the schools require. It's not what education is asking at the moment. So I felt this frustration, and going into school with story gives me the opportunity, I think, to do the good work. Or I don't do the stories do the good work. I don't do the good work.
I'm excited to start this whole other conversation now going on in the chat about Pi Corbett.
Yes, I know, I can see.
Yes, which Pi Corbett is beloved by many schools, and I kind of get some of it, that I like the fact of the physicality to learn things, but it doesn't feel to me like a creative use of time, and I don't really get it. And as soon it is one of those things that every time I mention storytelling in a school setting, people go, "Oh yes, we do Pike Orbit," and I kind of go, "Great."
Yeah.
And it's a very weird thing, the whole Pike Orbit phenomenon, and I probably need to look into it more. And I'm sure that there's research that's been done that proves that Pike Orbit is a marvelous thing. It's not something I'm an expert on, and it's definitely not what I call storytelling.
No, me. I mean, it'll get your children writing. And particularly when just about the time I was leaving, lots of different non-fiction texts, and using story mapping in order to achieve that, to do the equivalent of pass a test, really. So, it's a way of doing that, but in terms of being creative.
James asking, I need a little explanation of what Pike Orbit is. I'm not the person to do this. Phil, you kind of, because you've done it. You explain the.
So he's a ex-teacher, I think an ex-head, an advisory teacher, vast amounts of experience.
The only person I know who's made a lot of money out of storytelling.
Yes, he's the only person. So there you go. Maybe he's got something. And so he comes into school with this process of storytelling that you can, and it's definitely to write. It's storytelling into writing. So there's this. So you've got the engagement, but then you're moving on to strategies in order to write, using story mapping. Still, though, that is kind of by rote. So my whole class would know how to write a persuasive text through this story map. And then they would have the opportunity to use their own vocabulary after that. But still, it is a way of meeting a target. It's a way of getting into an objective. And I avoid objectives. I used to have to learn an objective on the board for my class. And it's I don't even go anywhere.
I mean, go and have a look at a video, Jane, but it is one of those, I've only seen children do it, and it's like, I don't know if they get to, if it's already written for them and they learn it, or if they develop it together, but you'll see a whole class recite a story. So the little girl looked and she, saw a bird fly, and it's, so everything's got like a gesture to go with it, and they all have the same gesture, and they do it at the same pace, and they recite it by rote. So it's a bit like watching a class recite a poem, but it's a story, and to my think it's a bit odd, but it has been proven to be successful and to go into writing, and there's lots of research being done about it. You could do a whole hour on that if you were Pike Orbit. He does days on it.
Yes.
Let's park that over there and go back to oral storytelling, because we have limited. This is a short time to suck you dry of all your knowledge, Phil. So that's the main reason. Then is like, kind of, is it been successful leaving storytelling? Have you managed to leave the paperwork behind? Has it given you freedom to do the things that you want to do?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that it's no surprise, to anybody here, I'm sure that, that I love storytelling, and I want to pass that on, and that experience on. And I don't know, I haven't got a percentage. Nearly everybody responds positively. Nearly everybody has fun. Nearly everybody enjoys it. And of course, research suggests, because we are storytelling animals, why wouldn't that be the case? We evolutionary biologists say now that for 100,000 years we've been evolving a storytelling brain, and this is how we create meaning. It's how we see the world, how we understand the world. I think they even say that babies, before they're born, have this storytelling brain. So sharing story with each other, it just makes this connection. Oxytocin is released in the brain, which is our empathy drug. So we care more. If we hear something from a story, we care more about it. If we care more about it, then it's more likely to go into the long-term memory as well. So, even if you're trying to impart information, if you wrap it in a story, it has much more impact.
I think that's so true. And I think people are constantly surprised. I mean, I think one of the big things about education is, do you still get this thing when you go into school when you're told that children don't have much of attention span and you probably won't get them to sit still for very long, and so keep the story short?
Well, they usually people look at, and because I'm a teacher, I know the look, and they look at, oh, you've got year 5.
Good luck.
But I always come out and say, well, they didn't leave any scars, and there's hardly any ever a problem. I've just been doing a project, and there's with one particular boy who's been very difficult to engage, and his teacher, who's with me all the time, just can't believe it. We've only done 2 days, but she absolutely can't believe how engaged he was, and engaged in every aspect. So coming up to me and asking me questions and making suggestions, and yeah.
So obviously, I mean, I don't know so much the benefits of other art forms, and I'm obviously a passionate advocate of storytelling. So you might be able to tell me kind of as well why storytelling is better than other art forms. But I mean, certainly in that, with boys like that, I think there is a real thing about there is quite often a child who struggles with writing and overcompensates, and they are loud, and they're a problem because they're very bright, but they struggle with writing. And this is definitely an art form that gives them the opportunity to shine. And when they're given that opportunity to shine, when they've got somebody else who doesn't know all their background, who comes in and believes in them and is willing to meet them where they are and give them an opportunity and listen to them, and they can change how they're seen by their own teacher, they revel in that and they take it and grab it with both hands.
Absolutely. And I think, I kind of always put front and center that we are storytelling animals, so they already possess all the skills they need. And I think that's borne out. That is borne out. We don't do anything as storytellers that anybody else doesn't do when they're telling stories, and we're always telling stories. We just kind of hone it in a slightly different way. But gesture, tone of voice, eye contact, we all do these things, and I think that in a way that I don't want to downplay it, but it makes the bar very low. It's not a frightening thing. So children engage. I can do this, and they can, and they're very successful at it, or they're very good at it.
So education it's been going through lots of rapid changes anyway. And certainly, it's very interesting for me where I live, because I live right on the border between England and Wales, and England and Wales are just going like that at the moment with education. And Wales is going much more creativity led. And England is not. England seems to be going back to the 3 R's and not ever having anybody come into school, and is much more kind of top down. It seems to be the opposite of a lot of things that are happening in England with in Wales, where they are talking about the high functioning classroom, where it is much more being child led, group activities instead of and this thing of the teacher showing what it is to take risks and modeling how to fail, how to make mistakes, and how that's sort of a really important part of the process. It's like there's that really famous story, isn't there, where kind of there's somebody who goes and they get lost in the woods, and they've been wandering around, and they finally meet this old man, and they go, "Oh, please, can you tell me the way out of the woods?" And he goes, "I've been in this woods for 60 years and I still haven't managed to find my way out." And he goes, "Oh, it's disaster. I'm never going to get out." And he says, "No, I can't show you the way out, but I can show you all of these different ways that aren't the right way out. And so there's only these 3 left to choose from." And it's kind of that, modeling the importance of different roads. And failure is it's such a loaded word, because it isn't. It's just like you take different paths until you find the one that you need. You still needed to take all of that paths. It's part of the journey. I've gone off on one again about creative. I get so excited about creative learning. So this was all happening anyway, and I think things have been changing very fast. Of course, COVID happened and lockdown happened, and it seems that schools have been under so much pressure and had to change so much again, and it's ramped up change massively, and it's changed the way that people teach. It's changed the way they engage with families. It's been a digital revolution, because they've had to become digital beasts. They've had to engage with parents and children in that way. But it's also now these children that have had 2 years of their education separate from other children who absolutely haven't had anything like storytelling and all of those group activities. And I'm wondering if storytelling has been useful to have a big impact on that, and how are you working with children afterwards, and how you're finding education, and what you've been able to use storytelling for post lockdown.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think after lockdown, when I've gone into schools, what I notice is almost regardless of the year group, that's not where they are. And that's not my expectation. They are, it is almost as though they've missed 2 years. So I'm working with 7-year-olds, year threes, and it is more like working with 5-year-olds. Of course, there are lots of things that they know, but socially, it's a very different thing. And so I have actually found, I mean, because storytelling connects us all, it makes community. Through the story, we make community. We can talk about feelings and characters and ourselves obliquely through story. We don't need to talk directly about ourselves, although if we're bringing our experience, so we are talking about ourselves. And I've found no matter what I'm doing on a project, and actually the project I've just started is a case in point, this aspect is probably the most important aspect. I have an inquiry question that I'm working towards with the teacher and the learners, but clearly this is what they need. They need the social interaction. They need the opportunity for social interaction. And I think story provides that. You know, the kind of activities we do around story and the kind of things that they do gives them the opportunity for this. And that kind of leads into the thing I've done with Steve Killick, Feelings Are Funny Things, where we look at stories, we look at feelings and thoughts and actions through stories. And that's very much beginning to build a vocabulary to talk about feelings. Because if you start writing, even with adults, but certainly with children, if you start asking them for feeling words, it can take quite a bit of time to get beyond happy and sad. So the more that and what is a feeling? What is it? I should leave Steve to do that more than me, but it's a really interesting question, and the different definitions that different groups come up with. Yeah.
And is there a demand for that in schools? Are they making time for that? I mean, obviously it's a program that you're offering, so you're managing to do it at least in some places. What is the response within education to that? Are they kind of going, we just haven't got time for this? Or are they going, this is the essential heart of what we need to do?
Anecdotally, it's the essential heart. And so within a project, I am not working with any teachers who don't give that time and room. But then I think they're looking at Lead Creative Schools projects as these little islands within the rest of the week, or the rest of the day, or the rest of the curriculum. I'm not sure. I think this has been going since 2015, isn't it? So we're into its 8th year.
The Donaldson report came out in 2015, and I think Lead Creative Schools started a little, maybe the year after that.
So we're 7 years in, and it's occasionally I go into school and you feel like it is embedded, and it is throughout the school, but very often it feels like just this little island.
Well, and this is it. I mean, the creative curriculum started in September, so the actual Lead Creative Schools has kind of been has been a pilot, has been starting to change the direction of travel, starting to prepare schools. The Donaldson curriculum only started in September, so we're halfway through the first year.
Yeah, but there's a lot of I mean, I can see what you're saying from that. We're only halfway through the first year, but in 2015 or 2016, when I was applying, that wasn't the intention, and everybody knew that creativity was going to be at the heart of the curriculum. I mean, I think this is just, I don't want to go too much down the teaching route, but I think this is just the weight of change and things that teachers have. So, you know, there's an avalanche of things coming, and it's only the thing that's right in your face that you're really going to be able to give time to and focus to. And so you're right, we are now at that point. So teachers are going, oh, I actually need to do this. We need to do something about this. What is this about? Whereas it hasn't felt like that before.
And what's interesting as well is that we've been taught, obviously primary is your focus, you're a primary school teacher, and we maybe both work more in primary, but you work more in secondary now as well, don't you?
Yeah.
And this is in Wales, this is a new approach in primary and secondary. The creative curriculum approach is also happening in secondary, and it is much more about being cross-curricular and applying creativity throughout the school and getting departments to work together in a much more cohesive whole, rather than now you've got maths, now you've got English, now you've got geography, never shall they ever meet. And if they can manage to do that, then it's going to be amazing. But they're not there yet.
No, and it is different. I mean, it can be a challenge to be in a secondary school, because whatever groups you have, because of the way timetables work, and some schools, I don't know about the secondary schools that you know, but some of them are on 2-week timetables as well, which kind of makes it really difficult. But one of the projects I worked in a secondary school was really focused on the teachers. It was a second year project. So they had learned from the first year. They'd taken a group in the first year. They did a fantastic project, but they could see that to embed this in the school, the focus needed to be the teachers. They're the ones who are teaching. So I worked with, I think, 4 different teachers from different departments, and with them to see how they could use story. And so I modeled something, and then we did something together, and then they created their own teaching resource out of that. And that was very successful. That felt very successful and very worthwhile. But a lot of the time, I think I'm probably repeating myself now. It just feels very isolated, and always on the enthusiasm of an individual.
Yeah, so I mean, what Alistair's just saying in the chat, but I mean, for children in those schools, even if you feel it's being grafted on, is there not a chance that children will have something, even if it's a moment that they can go back and remember, that was me?
Yeah,
I would say that those projects, and I'm lucky, I get to work as a creative practitioner and creative agent. The creative agent helps sort of facilitate schools finding artists and helps put the project together. I haven't seen many projects that aren't successful that haven't had a real impact on the children that are involved.
I would absolutely agree. That's worthwhile. And you asked me about having left teaching and going into schools as a storyteller, and for me that's a really big part of it. That's the main part of it. It's the impact that it has on the children.
But even better is when it has the impact on the teacher.
Yes.
It gives them that CPD, that gives them the confidence to change the way they teach, to try something new and to take new things into the classroom. And it's trying to be a long-term thing. So it does feel like it's at the beginning. And you said to me earlier, it's the direction of travel at the moment.
Yeah.
It's still, struggling from that place of being at the bottom of the pizza table. It's a very big ship to turn around. But I had a really inspiring afternoon. This afternoon, I was part of a networking meeting of people who've been working on year 3 projects. So they've had two projects, and now this year 3, that there's a lot more space, and the school's been going, how do we embed this within our school? What do we do to support our teachers and to support creative learning in our schools? And some are taking that further than others. Some have, are further along that path, because you can only go from where you are and travel as far as people are willing to go. But everybody was approaching that in a different way, and everybody was trying to embed that, and really exciting stories, and really exciting that they're all different, and that people are going, well, this is our school. How's it going to work with our children, our demographic, and our teachers? So there's so many inspiring stories, but I suppose, not necessarily all of those inspiring stories have quite met each other yet.
No, that's true.
There are many things that I still want to talk to you about, and questions that I've got, but I do want to open it out. So if there are people here with questions and things that you want to ask Phil, please put them in the chat or in the Q&A. And while you write those down, I am going to get mine in, because one of the big things that happened during lockdown that I think has been a sea change, and should be a sea change in all education, and I'm not sure it's been enough in England. I know I've been pushing with some of my local schools and making myself quite unpopular by asking difficult questions. But obviously, Black Lives Matter has been a sea change in just cultural and the way we're talking about things, and how the whole country is going, not just education. And it feels like Cynefin in Wales is the response to that. And I'm not sure that everybody in Wales knows what Cynefin is, let alone the wider world. But it sounds like a really amazing seed. So will you tell us about that?
Yeah. So Cynefin, the Cynefin project, Cynefin, culturally and ethnically diverse Wales, is built on the Lead Creative Schools idea and experience. So straight away, actually, I've undermined what I said, because this is a move forward and it is positive. And Cynefin is a Welsh word for which there is no direct translation, but it means something like belonging, something like the place that you feel you belong in. So it's something to do with habitat and place. And these projects are looking at what it means to belong in multicultural Wales today. This is linked to the fact that Wales has the stated goal of being an anti-racist nation by 2030. And so a kind of definition of anti-racism, which is my interpretation of it, but to be non-racist is to do nothing. It's just not to be racist yourself, but to be anti-racist is to call it out when you hear it. And I would add to that, that it's anti-racist, but it's discrimination in general, for me at least. And so it's working with creative practitioners, all sorts of creative practitioners, storytelling for me, but lots of other creative practitioners. From that definition of Lead Creative Schools as what a creative practitioner is, so could be anything, to investigate with the learners, with the children themselves, what they think belonging means in a culturally and ethnically diverse Wales. It's definitely needed. There are a lot of pockets of diversity in Wales, in the cities as you'd expect, but there are lots of places where there is none at all. And so investigating through story for me, but it could be through anything. It could be through sport. It could be through, I did a project 2 years ago where the local children in Swansea decided they wanted to look at heroes in their community. So they found people within their community, they interviewed parents, they found people within the community who they decided were heroes. And that was a multicultural school, and these kids were 2 years old. 2 years old, year 2. So they were 5. And at the beginning, one of the things they did at the beginning of the project, they were asked to do a self-portrait. And I would have said 65, 70% of the children were brown. They were from an ethnically brown background. And they painted themselves pink. And so this was, so this turned into a kind of benchmark for the project, because they did it again at the end. And then they chose an appropriate color for themselves, just through story and talking to people in the community.
Wow. I'm stunned by that. That's yeah, and it is small changes. And I think I mean, one of the questions that I had at the beginning, I think, was, why is storytelling a particularly good art form for education? You know, kind of, if you can go in with any art form, what difference does storytelling make? And I think that's the thing, is so many of these projects are about investigation and inquisitiveness and exploring. And I think storytelling can hold so much. And when you're zipping off with lots of questions and lots of different directions and exploring, the story is the thing that ties all of that together, that brings a whole wealth of different things into a cohesive whole that we can understand. And it can be just an amazing lens to understand all the information that's being thrown at you. And at the same time, while it's been a lens to understand, it's also a very good way to ask questions in a robust and sensitive way that doesn't have to be particularly personal, or you know, you can do it as a wider question that is not offensive and not difficult, but you can tackle those difficult subjects within that. And I think that as long as there's people, there's going to be a place for story. And I think that for children, kind of storytelling and education, if storytelling is ever lost from education, then we're doing an incredible disservice to our children. I also think that we just have the most amazing opportunity at the moment. There's nothing like in-person storytelling. There's nothing like having that project where you go in and where you're in the room with the children and you are sharing stories together. But we literally have a window to the world. Every time we put a computer, it's a window where you can go absolutely anywhere. And I'm working on a project at the moment with it. I've just started. Again, it's with year 2. They're 6 and 7-year-olds, and I'm going in, and actually they're more like 5-year-olds, because they just haven't had that social interaction. And I've been we're looking at what it is to be Welsh and what their identity is and what their heritage is. It's a very white area, but it's also on the border, and they don't necessarily always feel that Welsh. My thing would be, well, if you're going to look at what being Welsh is, you need to look at the rest of the world and your place within the world. So I'm very lucky that I'm going to the Marrakesh International Storytelling Festival tomorrow. So I'm taking my project with me. I'm taking my computer with me. And the first thing that we're going to do as part of that project is I'm going to be zooming back every day from Marrakesh with a storyteller from a different place. Storytellers who are a variety of colours, a variety of cultures, a variety of genders, to go, this is the country that I come from. This is the story from where I come from. I am like you. I am different from you. These are the similarities. These are the differences. These are how we can connect. And isn't it great we share this and go, look, I've got this cool thing over here, but what have you got that makes you cool and what makes you unique? And it's that thing. It's celebrating uniqueness while sharing our similarities and what makes us human. And I think, you know, it's fantastic that we've got people from all over the world tonight. And share your stories with people from all over the world. And I think, you know, if there's anybody in education here, you do have opportunities to connect with storytellers all over the world, and it's another thing that you can give to your children. So we haven't had any questions on the chat and on the Q&A. Well, we've been talking about Cynefin. I was thinking everybody might be, you know, typing madly and going, I really need you to ask Phil this. Everybody, this is your very last chance, because it is now 9 o'clock, and I'm going to wrap things up unless there's a frantic tapping of keyboards. Bill, thank you so much. It's such a big subject, and I realise also we've had to narrow it down to our personal experience of England and Wales. Joanne's is saying, "Oh, how can I see your stories you bring back from Marrakesh?" You can see stories that I bring back from Marrakesh by coming to Blast on Friday. So Blast is my usual storytelling club, which is normally in person in Bishop's Castle, but we're going to do an online version on Friday where basically I turn up at the World Storytelling Cafe, and people who are early are going to come and sit and share stories. So it'll be a world event. You won't be able to see the ones from school. One of the advantages of me being in Marrakesh that can be an issue with Zoom is safeguarding. So I am in the room. I can make sure that nobody else is seeing that secure link with me and my school. So I'm DBS checked and got all the appropriate checks. So I am then guarding that storyteller who and making sure that I've chosen somebody appropriate, which makes it a bit easier for the school to do that. So you can't come. I'm hearing Eve saying, "Oh, any questions would have been a distraction." Jane, it's fine. You need to go. We're going in a moment anyway. But yes, you'll be able to see Blast. And there will be lots of online events from Marrakesh. Go to the World Storytelling Cafe site, and you'll be able to join on the gold button for quite a lot of events during the week. So yes, the festival starts. Well, I'm kind of the fringe on Friday. The festival, I think, is officially from Sunday to Friday, but there'll be events really for kind of from Thursday for the next 10 days. Elaine, I would be interested in comments on how the circle goes round, right? Education stars. Do you mean the creativity wheel? I'm not quite sure what you mean by the circle, or was that when we were talking about Pi Corbett and the circle? I will happily talk to you about that, Elaine, but I don't know quite what you mean. Alice is saying the passion is inspiring. I just wish that Welsh could invade England, education at least. Alistair, I am with you. I am so with you. It's frustrating being on the border. So my children are educated in England. I am a governor in England, and teachers are passionate in England. Teachers are just amazing in England as they are in Wales. It's the support in a different structural system. Oh, yes. Sorry, Elaine, I missed your earlier comment. Elaine means we were into creative education in the 60s and 40s, my earlier comment. It's difficult, isn't it? There was a point within education, certainly in England, where there wasn't enough checking of teachers, and it was a real potluck. There were amazing teachers, and there were teachers who had kind of got a bit stale and been doing the same thing for 30 years, and there wasn't enough accountability. Which is when the national curriculum came in, and there's room to be creative within the national curriculum, but that's a big issue, isn't it? And absolutely, the interesting thing with Lead Creative Schools were trained by people who did creative partnerships in England, which finished. I did one of the last projects, creative partnerships, when my daughter was in nursery, so that's 12 years ago, and literally kind of, and now England this pendulum has swung away from it, and in Wales it's swung back towards creativity. There is a balance point to be found somewhere, and I'm not sure that anywhere has quite found it at the moment. And that is the thing, all teachers and everybody wants to do the best for our children. We all want to create a fantastic education. I think there's always going to be an argument about the best way to do that. And I would definitely argue that storytelling should always be at the heart of any education system.
I think in Britain, certainly we suffer from our politics, because new education ministers usually mean a new broom. So there isn't anything new under the sun. Certainly the teachers that I've worked with, lots of them have said, we were doing this 20 years ago, we were doing this 30 years ago. So it's a kind of educational fashion. So I kind of pray that in Wales, at least now, we have this approach that we are tweaking and improving, not completely changing everything.
And what is one of the good things about the Lead Creative Schools scheme is that there is an awful lot of documentation about it. So the proof is being gathered that it does actually work, and it works in a holistic way. That yes, you hit all the targets that you need to hit, that it isn't like, it shouldn't be something that is on top of everything else, that it is integrated into the system. It is part of the curriculum. It should be supporting the rest of the curriculum. And at the same time, it's helping health and wellness and well-being. It's helping empathy. It's one of the big key points in the new curriculum is about citizens of the world. It's about citizenship, which certainly seems to be something that is more needed than any other time. And again, it's like the creativity and storytelling and looking at the empathy is really building on that. So that for parents out there, for educationists, I'm just going to say there is hope. There is hope, and there are an awful lot of passionate people who want to do their best. And excitingly, there is money for the arts in Wales at the moment, and for creative industries. That isn't the same all over the world at all. So thank you, Phil. It's been just an education to talk to you. It's been fantastic. So if you've enjoyed tonight, I think you've stayed. And there have been lots of lovely comments at the end. Please look at them afterwards, Phil. If you've enjoyed Phil's work, go to his website, Phil Okwedy, storyteller.co.uk. There's no @ in that, which took me by surprise. So Phil Okwedy, storyteller.co.uk. You'll find that very easily. And you can follow him on Facebook. Are you on Instagram and Twitter?
I am. Not that often, but I am.
Go to the website or Facebook are your best options, I feel there. And obviously we've been talking about your educational work tonight, but education is in the wider sense. It's not just within schools, and it's not just for children. You have been working with Adverse Canberra. You're touring an amazing piece at the moment, which I think is educational and entertainment. And for everybody, the gods are all here. Have a look on Phil's website. Look at his tour list. If it's near you, then go and see it. And there may be opportunities to see it online as well, possibly.
There may be. I'm going to be in Dorset at the end of February. 3 dates in Dorset, Sherborne, Shilling, somewhere. Can't remember.
Not so much use if you're in Oklahoma, but never mind.
No. Well, you never know.
Well, you indeed will travel. But you do work online as well. So
I do.
just keep an eye out for Phil's amazing work. If you have enjoyed tonight, then please subscribe to my YouTube channel and go and have a look. There's lots of other episodes of Taking the Tradition on, lots of other extraordinary and marvellous people. I will be back the first Tuesday of March, which, because February, I believe, is the 7th of March. So it's the same date, different month. And unusually for me, I haven't already sorted out who my next person is going to be, partly because I'm going to Marrakesh, and I know that there are going to be 80 storytellers from all the way around the world, and people that haven't met yet. So I'm leaving the door of opportunity open. But I'm also very up for suggestions. If there are people that you would love to see in conversation, that you would love to see on Taking the Tradition on, then tell me, and maybe I will listen and do something about it. And if you want to hear who is on next month, then you will just have to follow me, and then you'll find out. So it's very easy to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I do all of those things, and subscribe on YouTube, and it will be up on there as well. But for now, thank you to Phil. Thank you to my patrons. Thank you to Get a Word in Edgeways, and just give all your love and a big whoop whoop for Phil Okwedy. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your thoughtfulness, your generosity, and your stories about education, and for being my guest.
Thank you, Amy, for inviting me, and thank you, everybody out there. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you very much for coming and for listening.